Week number 6 has come to a close, and now it is time to flip the page and move to the next chapter of the season, week number 7. In today's video, I'm going to help you guys do exactly that, breaking down all 15 matchups at the running back position from Thursday Night Football all the way up until Monday Night Football with the doubleheader, and I will be telling you guys whether you should start or sit the running backs in all of those games, as well as discuss where I believe each running back will finish by the end of the week. There are only 15 games this week because there are 2 teams on bye, the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. Before we get on into today's video, though, I would like to ask, if you are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. So without further ado, let's get into my week number 7 running back start or sit decisions for the 2025 fantasy football season. We begin with Thursday Night Football, the Pittsburgh Steelers at the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, last week was a very big disappointment for anyone who fired up Jaylen Warren or Kenneth Gainwell. Now, the matchup up against the Browns was tough on paper, and that proved to be the case last week. I wasn't the most confident in Jaylen Warren. I thought maybe he would be able to do a little bit more than he did end up doing in that game, though. He had 11 carries for 52 yards and 2 receptions on 2 targets for 11 yards in a game in which the Steelers cruised to victory. Tons of people were worried about Gainwell's involvement due to how strong that he played up against the Vikings in Ireland the week prior to the bye. I told you guys not to worry about that, and that proved to be correct. He played just 34% of the snaps compared to Warren's 53%, with Caleb Johnson kind of just picking up the scraps with 19% of the snaps. Gainwell had 12 total touches due to him receiving 6 receptions on 6 targets for 14 yards. We should operate under the assumption that Jaylen Warren is still the guy, though, in this offense, and in a polar opposite matchup to last week, facing up against a Bengals defense that allows the most points to running backs on a per-game basis, Jaylen Warren is a high-end running back too, and Kenneth Gainwell should stay on your bench. So for the Cincinnati Bengals, Chase Brown is just barely a start-worthy running back, and for most of you guys, I would honestly prefer if he was sitting on your bench. If you have to play him, I get it, but he is still very much on the fringe start-worthy range where it's kind of just break glass in case of emergency in the RB3 range. Joe Flacco did end up injecting a small ounce of life into this offense, but I do expect the Steelers defense to be all over him in this spot. The matchup on paper is middle of the road for Chase Brown, as the Steelers allow the 17th most points to running backs on a per game basis. He has yet to score more than 14 fantasy points, though, in full PPR this season, and I think at this point of the season, you are just happy with him getting 10 to 12 fantasy points. So if you are in a pickle and you need to start him, go right ahead, but ultimately that's really just kind of the worst case scenario. If I can barely talk about Chase Brown in any positive manner, we aren't starting the Cincinnati Bengals running back too. Now we move to Wembley, United Kingdom on Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Set your alarms, because this might actually be a banger matchup overseas. The Los Angeles Rams versus the Jacksonville Jaguars, a home game for Duval, even though it is in Wembley Stadium. Kyren Williams continues to rack up top 12 showings, back-to-back weeks inside of the top 12, and most likely without Puka Nacua, the team will have to lean more on Kyren Williams, in my opinion. The Ravens proved to really have no answer for Kyren Williams last week in Baltimore, with 13 carries for 50 yards and a touchdown, as well as 2 receptions on 2 targets for 37 yards, with 3 total touchdowns over the last 2 weeks and 5 total touchdowns on the year through the first 6 games of the season. Kyren Williams is a must-start running back in a slightly below average matchup for running backs. I got him as a high-end running back too. Blake Corum continues to be largely irrelevant in this offense. I wouldn't even be shocked if he had fewer than 5 touches this week. So with Kyren healthy, Corum is just a handcuff that should be left on your bench. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, Travis Etienne has hopped into a frozen lake like his name was Marab Dawalishvili over the last few weeks, the last 2 games specifically, because the man has run ice cold. Shout out to Frozone. Fewer than 10 PPR points in back-to-back showings, and the panic meter is slightly up. Obviously, 2 games against mid-range matchups that didn't go his way doesn't completely wipe out what we saw in weeks 1 through 4, but the emergence of BTJ and the passing attack does definitely have me at least slightly worried. 12 carries for 27 yards last week up against the Seahawks as well as 4 receptions on 5 targets for 28 yards in one of the toughest matchups for running backs up against the LA Rams. I think you definitely cannot consider him as a top 12 running back. Obviously, with how good ETN has been for a majority of this season, if he was a top 12 running back, I don't think I would be completely perplexed. But again, tough matchup. Don't want to rank him as a top 12 guy. Even with him clearly keeping Tootin in the rearview mirror, I got him as a low-end running back 2 this week. Bashal Tootin popped off in week 2 and followed that up with another touchdown in week 3. Ever since then, he has failed to eclipse 5 points in 3 straight matchups. I still think Tootin is a fine bench stash, but with ETN being the clear running back 1, having a clear stranglehold over this backfield in a brutal matchup, and with LaQuint Allen outsnapping Tootin in back-to-back weeks, why even bother considering starting him? Now we move to the 1 p.m. slate on Sunday with the New Orleans Saints at the Chicago Bears. Now, Alvin Kamara's finish last week was heavily inflated by the fact that the running back scoring was incredibly weak last week. Running back 14 scoring just 12.6 points in PPR up against the Patriots with 10 rushes for 31 yards and 5 receptions on 5 targets for 45 yards. At this point in the season, I think it's time to kind of just wave the white flag on Alvin Kamara. I'm not saying that we should be sitting him, but with Kendre Miller very involved in this offense, seeing likely 10 plus touches weekly, Kamara's upside is now significantly lower than seasons prior due to the increased usage of Kendre Miller. And the offense is still kind of just stalling out. They're far from ideal, and that also hurts Alvin Kamara. One of these days, he could have that big game because I feel like when I'm watching him, he doesn't look washed, right? He doesn't look bad. There's just more usage to the running back too, and the offense really isn't that good, so we kind of just feel limited with him. But at this point, ranking him any higher than like a high-end running back 3 would be insane, and that is where I got him, even in a top 6 matchup for running backs on a per-game basis up against the Bears. At this point in the season, Kendre Miller sees enough usage in this offense to just completely cuck Alvin Kamara, but not enough work to actually take over from Kamara and become a guy that you would want to start. Fewer than 6 fantasy points in back-to-back showings, and even in an ideal matchup here, I have no interest in starting him. Now, maybe Alvin Kamara does end up getting traded, and then Alvin Kamara is super useful somewhere else, and Kendre Miller's a guy that you can start as like a low-end running back too. He becomes a startable asset. But as of right now, Kendre Miller's just a guy you kind of have cooking on your bench. If something happened to Alvin Kamara, knock on wood, you may be able to play Kendre Miller. If Alvin Kamara gets traded, then Kendre Miller could become a startable asset. But as of right now, all he is a bench stash. DeAndre Swift put up the type of showing up against the Commanders on Monday Night Football that I legitimately never saw coming. Like an RKO from I almost said from Randy Orton. That was like Dana White yesterday announced that there was a bunch of fights, and instead of ranked fighter, he was like, I think it was Merab Dvalishvili, the champion, going up against, who's he going up against? Peter Yan, the 3rd ranked fighter. It was so funny. I don't know why I just thought of that. But okay, so this was the best we have seen DeAndre Swift look this season in a game that was so wet that I wish Sidney Sweeney was in attendance in a white tank top. RB6 with 14 carries for 108 yards and 2 receptions on 3 targets for 67 yards and a touchdown, with that huge touchdown reception in that showing. Now, I will give DeAndre Swift credit because I didn't think that he would ever do something like this, and he was kind of just a low-end to mid-range running back 2 every single week, and was one of the least sexy running backs that you could play every single week, because you kind of just knew the upside was limited. He was just going to be kind of mid, and you could win your week with him in your lineup because the other players do good, but he was never really going to put that team on his back, but he actually did it last week. So him reaching the RB6 finish is definitely something for me to give the guy credit for, but, and there's a big but, shout out to Lisa Ann, are we going to fall victim into tricking ourselves into thinking DeAndre Swift is now a high-end running back 2 or a top 12 running back? Fuck no, baby. In a below average matchup for running backs on a per game basis, I think DeAndre Swift goes back to his old ways as a mid-range to low-end RB number 2. Kyle Monaghy appears to be the clear running back 2 ahead of Roschon Johnson at this point. I have said this all year. I think Monaghy deserves more work, and I really do think he could be better than Swift, even though Swift just went insane in the membrane last week. But until the team actually pushes the agenda that way, this is more of just a conspiracy theory. So all he is a handcuff. Next up, we move to the Miami Dolphins at the Cleveland Browns. Now, Devon Achane and Jalen Waddle are like the meme of the Bugatti that is parked in the driveway of a mobile home. If the Miami Dolphins let Achane go when his contract is up, or if for some reason they go on a fire sale, which I think they should do, and they end up trading him, I may have to stop being a fan of this team. Achane is one of the few pieces on this team that makes watching the games on Sunday that I know we are going to lose somewhat enjoyable, just remotely enjoyable. And I genuinely feel bad for this guy because he is stuck dealing with not only a dysfunctional organization, a dysfunctional offense, and a dog shit offensive line. Last week up against the Chargers, he went nuclear. Top 8 running back, scoring 31 PPR points with 16 carries for 128 yards and 4 receptions on 6 targets for 22 yards. And while the Browns are one of the toughest matchups for running backs on a per game basis, which we spoke about earlier with Jaylen Warren, due to how much receiving work Achane could see weekly, even in the rough spot, he is a locked and loaded top 12 back in my rankings. All 6 games this year inside the top 18, one of the safest backs you can start weekly. For Ollie Gordon, I say this every single week, so I apologize if I sound like a broken record, but Ollie Gordon is being held down by this offense. If the Dolphins were actually good offensively, then you would be able to see them run the ball late, and you would see a lot more Ollie Gordon. But since we suck more cock than Riley Reid, there is no reason to ever start this man who has scored less than 3 fantasy points every single game outside of 1. Before we talk about the Cleveland Browns running backs, I do want to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our partner over at Underdog. If you're brand new to Underdog, and sign up using promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description, you will get a free pick, plus a first-time deposit offer of up to $1,000 in bonus funds, as well as if you play $5 in the pick'em, you receive an additional $100 in bonus funds or in bonus entries. How the pick'em works is incredibly simple. You make at least 2 picks on the higher or the lower. If both picks hit, you get paid. If you do multiple other picks, then the payout will be higher, but all the picks have to hit. Make sure you guys do check that out. Promo code Notorious, or by clicking on the link in the video description. Now back to the Cleveland Browns here. Anyone that has watched the Miami Dolphins this season will note 2 things. Number 1 is how the fuck does Chris Grier still have a job after constructing this roster like a child trying to paint the Mona Lisa? And 2, this defense couldn't stop the average D3 college player up against the run. Rico Dowdle put them on a t-shirt 2 weeks ago, and last week, Kamani Vidal looked like fucking Adrian Peterson with a beat-up offensive line up against the Dolphins defense. Now, close your eyes. We're going to do a bit of an exercise here. Close your eyes and envision what Quinshon Judkins is going to do. Quinshon Judkins is going to face fuck us for 4 straight quarters. The Dolphins defense is going to get sliced open, Jack the Ripper style. They stand 0 chance. And as a Dolphins fan, I'm waving the white flag. I already know that Judkins is going to do us dirty. I might have to purchase some lube due to how this man is going to fuck the Dolphins right in the ass. It is disgusting to watch how terrible this team is every single Sunday. It is disgusting that we pay these motherfuckers so much money and they can't stop Rico Dowdle. They can't stop practice squad Kamani Vidal. Imagine what Quinshon Judkins is going to do. Just think about it. This guy is going to go bananas. Judkins didn't even look good up against the Steelers last week in Pittsburgh, falling outside the top 40 at running back, but it doesn't matter. In a top 5 matchup for running backs on a per game basis, Judkins is a locked and loaded top 12 option. Jerome Ford F-150 and Quinshon Judkins saw an even 40% of the snaps last week, with Sampson playing just 18%. Even with all those snaps, though, Jerome Ford just had 7 total touches. Even in a wet dream matchup, I would not even remotely consider playing Jerome Ford. Next up, we move to the Los Vegas Raiders going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, despite the slow start to the season for Ashton Jeanty after the first 3 weeks of the season, he has been riding high. 3 straight top 15 PPR performances and 2 of 3 games inside the top 12. The Bijan rookie year comparisons are looking dead for Mr. Jeanty. 4 touchdowns over the last 3 weeks has me feeling real nicey. Shout out to John Gruden. I expect the Raiders to get absolutely dominated like what happened to Ankalaev when he fought Pereira a few weeks ago. So that definitely does hurt. But even if that does happen, Jeanty still has the opportunity to backdoor a top 12 finish. 23 rushes for 75 yards and a score last week up against the Titans, and I'm sure the Titans will remember that, as well as 2 receptions on 4 targets for 11 yards last week. With a slightly below average matchup this week on a per game basis for running backs up against the Chiefs, I got Jeanty as a low-end RB1. Raheem Mostert is the clear RB2 on this team at this point, but that is all he is. I expect to see at least 70% of the snaps going the way of Jeanty, and he's going to really need to step up for this team to even keep this game close, so Mostert should just kind of be on your waivers. I don't even think Mostert is good enough if something was to happen to Jeanty. Knock on wood that Raheem Mostert would even be all that useful. Now, despite facing the Raiders and this being a top 12 matchup on a per game basis for running backs, I simply just cannot play these Chiefs running backs. Even with Pacheco starting to run away with the running back snaps, he played 77% last week, with Kareem playing 30% and Rashad Smith getting 9%. Pacheco had 12 carries for 51 yards and 1 reception on 3 targets for 0 yards. Way may be knocking on the door of that big game, but I just frankly can't do it. Pacheco has only scored more than 10 PPR points once this season, and even with 13 total touches last week, he scored just 6.1 fantasy points. If he shows me something this week, I will feel better going forward, but until I actually see it, I cannot start him. I just cannot make a strong enough argument for you guys to actually put this man in your lineup, with Kareem Hunt getting lapped by Pacheco with just 7 touches last week and 8 the week prior. Unless he scores, you're going to have a bad time. And even if he does score, you aren't even ended up to have a good time. So I would just sit him. Next up, we move to the Philadelphia Eagles at the cold-like Minnesota Vikings. Now, I just know deep down that Saquon Barkley is beyond embarrassed that his documentary debuted following his former team, the Giants, giving his new team, the Eagles, back shots on Thursday Night Football. The Eagles' offense this season has been far from what most expected, which was even more true last week as the offense was nothing short of limp dick. 12 carries for 58 yards and 2 receptions on 3 targets for 9 yards in MetLife. On Thursday Night Football, the revenge game narrative didn't work for Mr. Barkley as he scored just 8.7 PPR points, and with A.J. Brown being as much of a diva as he is, the Eagles team 1 year off of a Super Bowl win may implode on themselves. The Vikings matchup is below average for running back, so while I'm a bit nervous based on what we have seen this season as a whole, you aren't sitting Saquon or ranking him outside the top 12 for the running back position. 4 games with 17 plus PPR points and 2 games with below 10. Hopefully we get back to normal this week as I have Saquon as a top 12 running back, but he is closer to 12 than he is 1 this week. For the backup running backs in Philadelphia, really neither of these guys even see the ball remotely enough to even consider talking about them. For the Vikings, Jordan, the numbers, Mason, what do they mean? Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell said today on Tuesday in it that J.J. McCarthy is building the foundation back up with his ankle injury. Seems like the team may have no choice but to actually play McCarthy, though, since Carson Wentz may not be able to get his revenge due to him managing a left shoulder injury, the team will hinge on the run regardless of which hobbled quarterback does end up starting. So that is a positive for Jordan Mason. With Aaron Jones still out, Mason will see a majority of the workload against a defense that just got destroyed by Cam Scatterboo and allows the 8th most points to running backs on a per game basis. Running back 22, last game out up against the Cleveland Browns prior to the bye in a rough matchup. He was just not the best, so I feel pretty good about him in a mid-range matchup here as a mid-range running back too. I do think that Jordan Mason should be fine. Not uber excited about him, though, if I'm being honest with you. After Xavier Francis Scott Key lit it up in Ireland against the Steelers in week number 4, he was cold as balls. Shout out to Kevin Hart in week 5, scoring negative fantasy points. There's no need to even roster him. Now we move to the Carolina Panthers at the New York Jumbo Jets. You might just get hit with Rico McMillan is going to be a start. Right now, we have no information on Chuba Hubbard, who has missed back-to-back games with a calf injury. If Chuba returns, I do believe that the keys to the backfield will be handed back to him, but it will be a much closer split compared to what we saw earlier on the season. If Chuba misses, Rico is a must-start top 12 running back. The guy is on a heater and in a slightly above matchup for running backs. I expect Rico to hit a home run like his name was Barry Bonds. Back-to-back top 2 finishes. Not top 12, top 2. He was the running back 2 and the running back 1. And the guy shows no signs of slowing down. Now, it is important to note that both games were up against run defense. That couldn't stop me, but he still deserves all the credit. Top 12 running back for me on the week if Chuba plays. Both of these guys kind of feel like low-end running back 2s because you want to start them because the upside is there, but the workload is too much of a question mark to rank either guy higher than that. And I do think if the offense continues to kind of ride this hot wave, then I think that, both Chuba and Rico could end up being start worthy. If Chuba misses, Etienne will be the RB2. Rico dominates the snap counts and the touch counts, though, so Trevor Etienne is irrelevant for fantasy. Hopefully, Breece Hall gets traded so that we could escape this shit show that is the New York Jets. Last week up against the Broncos in London, 22 carries for 59 yards. Prior to that, 2 straight 16-plus point performances in PPR. Breece is a very talented running back, and I do think that things will get better for him, even if the Jets are a complete and utter failure from the top down organizationally. This is a slightly below mid-range matchup on a per-game basis for running backs, so I expect the Jets offense to kind of just get back to their normal ways as garbage time kings. I wouldn't expect much early, but late in the game, Breece should be good enough to be like a high-end to mid-range running back number 2. For Isaiah Davis, I do think Isaiah Davis is like a solid pickup piece because if Breece Hall does get traded, then he just instantly becomes the RB1 here without Braylon Allen. But besides that, I mean, the guy's not even guaranteed to get a positive yard, so you're not going to be starting him. Next up, we got the New England Patriots at the Tennessee Titans, the least exciting game at the running back position. Last week, I talked about how just because Ramondre Stevenson scored 2 touchdowns as the RB18 against the Bills in Buffalo on Sunday Night Football Week 5, doesn't mean that Ramondre Stevenson is now a guy that you want to actually start, even without Antonio Gibson. Ramondre has done this forever. You buy in after one big game just for him to have you wishing you could go back in time and take him out of your lineup in the next game. That was exactly what happened as he scored just 1.8 PPR points up against the Saints last week in the NO. 13 carries for 18 yards and 1 target for 0 receptions. Even without Gibson, this guy has zero reliability. Zero reliability at all. And he is going to randomly show up again this season, and people will fall for the trap again, just like they did after he hit the Dolphins with some haymakers as the RB6 and followed that up as the RB52. Some people just don't learn their lessons, right? Some people fall for the same trap over and over, all right? I get this is a top 5 matchup for running backs on a per-game basis this week, but Ramondre Stevenson is the textbook definition of fool's gold. Now, Travion Henderson has been one of the most frustrating players to own this season. You paid the piper to draft him. You know the upside is there. You know how good the guy is. We saw it in college and in training camp, but due to missteps with penalties and failed pass blocking, this guy can't seem to stay on the field. After receiving 50% of the snaps in week 5, he had just 30% last week with Ramondre playing 72%. If for some reason you had both guys and you're forced to play one, it would be Ramondre. I don't want anything to do with Henderson right now. Now, the Titans fired Brian Callahan yesterday, and the interim head coach is going to be Mike McCoy, who was the senior offensive assistant for the Titans. Maybe the new coach can fire this team up and, give them a little bit of life. I'm not even sure if I see that. With Tajay Spears back in the fold, we saw him out-snap Pollard last week in his second game back. 59% of the snaps for Spears, and 43% for Tony Pollard. I don't feel confident that this will be the case going forward. Pollard had 10 carries for 34 yards up against the Raiders in Viva Las Vegas with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 13 yards. Spears with more snaps had less touches with 5 rushes for 41 yards and 4 receptions on 4 targets for 19 yards. With this backfield being super confusing and with the Titans offense being terrible to say the very least, I have zero interest in starting either guy at this point, especially with this being a low-end matchup for running backs on a weekly basis. The New York Giants at the Denver Broncos moves us to the 4 p.m. slated game. So if you haven't enjoyed this far, hit that subscribe button down below if you are new. Cam Scatterboo is an absolute wrecking ball. Shout out to Miley Cyrus. And he honestly may be on the short list of the most exciting running backs to watch in the whole NFL. The way the guy initiates contact on every single run makes me think that this guy doesn't care about the CTE that may hit this man like his name was Chris Benoit. 19 carries last week for 98 yards. Not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 12 yards as a top 5 running back. Even with Tyrone Tracy back in the fold, Scatterboo played 74% of the snaps, with Tracy playing 32%. The team clearly believes heavily in Scatterboo, and rightfully so. So even in a less than ideal matchup up against the Broncos, Scatterboo should be in the top 12 conversation going forward. Just 4 carries for Tracy in his return, and while he is the clear RB2, getting that spot back from Devin Singletary, I see no reason as to why you would ever start him with Cam, I'm a scat man, Bobby Lip-Up, on fire NBA Jam style. Last week, J.K. Dobbins hit my fantasy team with one of those baseball bats that has spikes on them that they use in like zombie TV shows, movies, video games. Like that video game where you would play against the zombies in the mall. I'm forgetting what the name of that game is, but you played that, you know. Dobbins had by far his worst game of the season in London up against the Jets with 14 carries for 40 yards and 1 target for 0 receptions in a dreadful 13-11 win that, in all honesty, I think they should have just lost that game, but the Jets are just that bad. And as the #1 overseas game hater on YouTube, a game like that makes me hope that the West Coast viewers slept in instead of waking up at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to witness that. Prior to last week for Dobbins, he had 5 straight games with 11 plus PPR points and 3 of 5 games with over 15 PPR points. So with just 1 down game, that does not mean that you should abandon ship on him, especially in a top 10 matchup for running backs. On a per game basis against the Giants, I got him bouncing back as a mid-range running back too. Even with J.K. Dobbins on the struggle bus, Harvey wasn't able to get anything going. 6 total touches for 25 yards, and with him likely playing fewer than 30% of the snaps, again, which would mark his 3rd game in a row doing that, I just can't play him. Next up, we got the This Is Our Colts, This Is Our Team, We Bleed Blue at the Los Angeles Superchargers. Now, Jonathan Taylor would be a top 3 pick in fantasy drafts, so we could go back to late August, early September, and redo our fantasy drafts. 3 finishes so far in 6 games as a top 2 running back with 4 of 6 games inside the top 8. Jonathan Taylor was unstoppable up against the Cardinals last week, and he was running like Scooby-Doo and the gang chasing a ghost through like 8 million doors in a hallway. How they're all just running fast as fuck trying to chase down like the goblin or the ghost or whatever they were chasing down. I haven't watched that since I was a kid, so that's what I remember it being. 21 carries for 123 yards and a touchdown, as well as 4 receptions on 4 targets for 14 yards as a top 8 running back. The Chargers matchup is slightly below average for running backs, so with JT putting defenses in the spin cycle weekly, he is a clear top 3 running back weekly in my rankings, and this week will be no different. Giddens saw just 5 touches last week, which was the 2nd highest mark on the season for him, so when I can't even guarantee legitimately more than a touch, he's had multiple games without a touch, no one should have this man in their lineup. He's just a handcuff. Kamani Vidal cemented himself as the running back 1 in the Chargers last week without Omarion Hampton in Miami. Now, I don't want to take away what he did last week, but him running for 124 yards on 18 carries with 3 receptions on 4 targets for 14 yards and a touchdown as top 12 running back shouldn't surprise anyone. Now, I'll admit I was wrong. I thought Haskins was going to be the running back 1 on the team, but anytime you can go up against the Dolphins defense And anytime a running back runs a train on the Dolphins defense, shout out to Bobby Bacala, no one should be shocked. This is a defense that is so sorry that I don't even understand how they make as much money as they do. There is no cohesiveness to the Dolphins defensive unit, and yet our defensive coordinator, Anthony Weaver, is still employed. I say all of this just so that you understand that just because Vidal looked amazing up against the Dolphins doesn't magically mean that he's a must-start top 12 running back going forward. With a banged-up offensive line and a slightly below average matchup, I got him as a low-end running back too. Serviceable for sure, but don't expect what you saw last week. Hassan Haskins played second fiddle all game long to Vidal with 31% of the snaps compared to Vidal 67. He had just 7 touches compared to Kamani's 21. So things aren't looking so hot for us Haskins truthers. I think I would be fine holding onto him on my bench for one more week just to see, hey, do maybe things look different, right? Maybe up against the Colts, they go with a different look. Maybe he's useful, but again, that's kind of more hopium, right? If you have to drop him, go right ahead. I'm not telling you got to fucking hold on to him for dear life, but if you have a bench spot and you can hold him, I would just hold him for one more game. And again, if it doesn't work against the Colts, you just drop him like it's hot. I'm definitely not advocating for you guys to throw him into your lineup. Now we got the Green Bay Packers at the Arizona Cardinals. Now, Josh Jacobs just had his way with the Bengals defense last week, which was my expectation, as the Bengals run defense is about as useful as a boxing glove in a knife fight. Jacobs ran 18 times for 93 yards and 2 touchdowns with 5 receptions on 5 targets for 57 yards, his best game of the season by 0.3 PPR points. As his last game against Dallas prior to the bye, he scored, 0.3 fewer. He had 31.7 points, putting the Cowboys defense in the figure 4. Now, both of those matchups were wet dream spots, right? Both of those matchups were as juicy as they could get. So I don't think we should just crown Jacobs as like a locked and loaded top 4 running back based on 2 showings. But last year, it was a slow start for Jacobs. He started to ramp up. Similar thing we've seen this year. I think he is on the right path. And with a top 10 matchup for running backs on a weekly basis, I got him keeping up that hot streak. I got him staying in the flame as a top 6 running back. For Emmanuel Wilson, we're kind of just too deep into this video to spend time analyzing, a backup running back. Fewer than 4 touches in 3 of 5 games. Just 4 last week, with Chris Brooks also taking away some snaps. No one should be starting him or even having them on their team, because if Josh Jacobs was to go down, knock on wood, I think we get kind of just a committee backfield approach that is just disgusting. Zonovan Bam Knight has become the lead back on the Cardinals ahead of Michael Carter, but saying that to me kind of feels like a bit of a white lie. Because while the report was, rumor has it, the report, hear ye, they say Michael Carter is going to be the backup running back, it's Bam Knight season. The game didn't start out that way, right? Michael Carter was the starter and seemed like he was going to see the work. And then Amari DiMarcado got hurt, and the offense shifted Bam into the lead back role and Carter into the 3rd down role. Assuming DiMarcado misses with the ankle injury, this should be Bam's backfield again. So you kind of fell ass backwards into Bam Knight having a good game, because if DiMarcado didn't get hurt, I think we would have been looking at Carter as the guy with the touchdown, but instead it was Bam Knight, 11 carries for 34 yards and a tug last week with 1 reception on 2 targets for 20 yards as the RB15, facing one of the toughest matchups for running backs on a weekly basis against the Packers. He is a desperation, break glass in case of emergency running back 3 start, with Bam more than likely to score the touchdown if the team can make it to the red zone, and especially if they get to the goal line. My interest level in Michael Carter is just kind of in the dirt. He should see a solid floor of receiving work, but in a brutal matchup, it's not even worth rolling the dice and starting him. For the Washington Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys, JCM, Bill Nye the football guy, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, absolutely shit the bed, screwed the pooch, did me dirty after putting up humongous big numbers in week number 5. In that game against the Chargers in LA, in week 5, 14 carries, 111 yards, not 1, but 2 touchdowns with 2 receptions on 2 targets for 39 yards, which was awesome. Everything was awesome, like the song in the Lego movie. And us Bill guys were jumping for joy. Hip, hip, hooray. And then on Monday Night Football, up against the Bears, he had 17 carries. That's good. but just 61 yards. And 1 reception on 1 target for 7 yards, falling outside the top 36 at the running back position. So while many may full on panic, I won't be, because he played his highest amount of snaps on the season with 66%. And while he is dealing with the case of Ramondre Stevensonitis by fumbling the ball left and right, the team has instilled confidence in him in a top 4 matchup for running backs. I think he's going to bounce back. Call me crazy. I think he's bouncing back. I got him as a low-end RB1 to high-end running back 2. Jeremy McNichols played 32% of the snaps last week, with Chris Rodriguez clocking in with 2% as he's clearly banged up. McNichols saw just 5 touches, with JCM seemingly handed the keys to this backfield. The other running backs on this team are unstartable, even as kind of speculative plays. Javonte Williams slipped on a banana peel last week as he dropped his worst performance of the season. 13 rushes for 29 yards, with a dreadful 2.2 yards per carry. 5 receptions on 8 targets for 5 yards in Carolina. And while that hurt like a butt cheek on a stick, this is a classic case of 1 down game doesn't mean anything when you put up as good a production as Javonte has this season. 3 games inside the top 6 and just 1 game outside the top 20, which was last week, facing a Commanders defense that just let DeAndre Swift run all over the yard against them and is the 13th best matchup for running backs on a weekly basis. I feel like the bounce back. Shout out to Big Sean. I feel like the bounce back is inevitable. Shout out to Thanos. I got Javonte as a top 10 running back on the week. Jaden Bonnie Blue, even with Miles Sanders out of the picture, just 9% of the snaps for Blue, with 18% of the snaps the week prior. He has barely received any work, just 3 touches last week. At this point, all he is just a handcuff for Javonte. Now we move to, cause you waited all day for Sunday night, the Atlanta Falcons at the San Francisco 49ers. Now, last night, Morgan Wallen let the liquor talk, and last night, Bijan Robinson made the Buffalo Bills call him daddy. 19 carries for 170 yards and a touchdown, as well as 6 receptions on 8 targets for 68 yards, one off of being very nice, I like, with 69 as the running back numero uno. Looking better than Josh Allen's wife in Sinners, Bijan has only fallen outside the top 12 at running back once this season, in week number 3 up against the Panthers, and in that game, he was the running back 13 in a top 12 matchup for running backs on a weekly basis. I expect Bijan to put on a show. Yet again, he is a clear must-start top 5 running back on the week. This is obviously the best running back matchup of the week, the most exciting running back matchup. Now, while Bijan was hitting the Bills with the 619 Rey Mysterio, Tyler Algier joined in on the Eiffel Tower, like they were in Paris, towering of that defense with 10 rushes for 32 yards and a tug, as well as 1 reception for 6 yards. Algier has now scored in 3 of 5 games and scored more than 10 points in each of those games. But the problemo here is, if he doesn't find the end zone, he scores less than 3 fantasy points. So with just 2 games on bye, and with Algier's touches being all over the place weekly, I don't feel there is a real argument to actually start him unless you are down tremendous, down astronomical at the running back position. So he is a sit for me, but he is one of the best handcuffs in all of fantasy. In life, 3 things are inevitable: death, taxes, and Christian McCaffrey being a top 8 running back. He has been a top 8 running back every single week of the season and has now scored a touchdown in 3 straight games. The amount of targets this guy sees on a weekly basis is insane, like that Post Malone song. Averaging 10 targets a game through the first 6 games of the season. Last week, he ran 17 times for 54 yards and a touchdown, as well as 7 receptions on 8 targets for 57 yards in a game where the offense wasn't even great in Tampa Bay against a Falcons defense that is one of the worst matchups for running backs on a per-game basis. I don't care at all. He's a must-start top 3 running back for me. Brian Robinson has been as useful as a hole in the head as far as this season has gone. He has yet to score more than 5 fantasy points, and while he is still rosterable because he is the clear heir to the throne if something was to happen to McCaffrey, knock on wood, that is all he is. Next up, we move to the first of 2 Monday Night Football games, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Monday Night Football game numero uno, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Detroit Lions. With Bucky Irving already ruled out for Monday Night Football, that makes me really worry that he may miss more than just this game and the last 2. Shockingly, that honestly, they didn't put him on IR. If, this will be game number 3, and, they already ruled him out, makes it Not seeing the best, especially since this game's on Monday Night Football. He gets the extra day. I don't know. I'm not trying to sit here and be like a fucking tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, but that does worry me, and it should worry you. In his absence, Rachaad White has filled those shoes perfectly. Back-to-back top 12 showings. Last week against the 49ers, he ran 17 times for 65 yards and a tug, as well as 3 receptions on 3 targets for 21 yards, 3 total touchdowns over the last 2 weeks, and there's zero reason to believe that that's just magically going to stop. Even in a bad matchup for running backs, which is largely inflated by the fact that they have played not the best running backs over the last few weeks, guys like Chase Brown and the Chiefs running backs, I expect Rachaad White to stay in the flame as a high-end running back number 2. Sean Tucker the fucker did score last week for the first time this season, but with just 6 touches in back-to-back games, and with Rachaad White seeing 80% of the snaps in week 5 and 77% last week, I don't expect Tucker to cut in much more, so that would make him a clear sit. For the Lions, Jahmyr Gibbs was sleeping like the Snorlax last week in Kansas City. 17 carries for 65 yards and 1 reception on 2 targets for 0 yards. While this is very, very, very disappointing, ultimately, after 1 game, we do not panic with one of the best running backs in the NFL in one of the best situations in the NFL for a running back. The Buccaneers are a top 12 matchup for RBs on a per-game basis, so I expect this man to hop back on the saddle like it's the good, the bad, and the ugly as a top 6 option. The same sentiment I've said about Dave Montgomery will not change all season. I'm going to say the same exact thing basically every week, but with slightly a different prediction, right? Most weeks, he's going to be a low-end RB2 to high-end running back 3. And you felt all right if you played him, since he didn't screw your team and the other guys can do the work and he keeps your head above water, right? And then every few weeks, he's going to bang his chest like King Kong on top of the Eiffel Tower. King Kong go to France. King Kong on top of the Empire State Building, banging his chest, right? And he just drops sack, right? He's a top 12 running back. He's going to do that every once in a while. And you will be ecstatic that you played him, right? He has 2 top 12 games so far this year. And while I think the matchup is good enough to rank him, decently, it's not the best, right? I don't think this is the best spot ever for a running back up against the Buccaneers. It's a top 12 matchup, but it's not like up against the Bengals where he went crazy when it was like a premier matchup. So while I think Gibbs should do good, he had just 6 total touches last week, Dave Montgomery. And with him playing in the 30 to 39% snap range, his home, get in your home. Shout out to Happy Gilmore. He's just in that fringe start running back 3 range. Final game here, the second game of Monday Night Football, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Shout out to all the East Coast people that get absolutely pounded by the NFL. Can't wait to stay up until 1 in the morning because you start a football game at 10 p.m. That makes sense. It's like a UFC event when the main card starts at 10 o'clock, except for this is the Houston Texans against the Seahawks, right? The only running back I'm starting in this game is Kenneth Walker, and I don't even want to start Kenneth Walker. Starting Kenneth Walker at this point feels like you're one of those sick, perverted dudes that enjoys having a woman kick them in the balls, right? And it turns them on, right? I will not knock it because I haven't tried it, but I prefer having a running back in my lineup that won't completely bend me over the table. And that is what Kenneth Walker has done perfectly ever since Charbonnet returned to the lineup. How this offense works is incredibly simple in terms of the rushing attack. Kenneth Walker does all the dirty work, and if he doesn't bust off a long run into the end zone, you are basically fucked. Because if he doesn't score and falls 1 millimeter before the goal line, Charbonnet is going to jog onto the field and punch the ball in. Facing the Texans defense that allows the 24th most points to the running backs on a per-game basis, Walker is a desperation start in the RB3 range. And honestly, if 2 teams weren't on bye, he would be listed as a sit. If Charbonnet doesn't score, you feel a type of pain that you've never felt before. 12 rushes for 24 yards last week. Very nice. I mean, what a great running back this is. Man, we really need to stop giving the ball to Kenneth Walker, right? 1 reception on 1 target for 13 yards last weekend. Duval as the RB44. With his ceiling feeling like 12 fantasy points in a tough spot up against Houston, no need to play him here. And like I said with Walker, I don't trust Walker either. So I'm not playing Charbonnet. For the Texans, this Houston backfield is one that I would prefer to analyze from afar, right? Put them on your bench and watch how it goes, right? One where in a mid-range matchup for running backs on a weekly basis, one of these guys can show up. But with how week 5 went prior to the bye in Baltimore, I don't think you should be rolling the dice on these guys, right? 7 rushes for 24 yards for Woody and 1 target and 0 receptions. Just one game after blowing the Titans defense's house down like the big bad wolf as the RB6 in PPR with 17 carries for 69 yards. Very nice. And a touchdown as well as 4 receptions on 5 targets for 50 yards and a touchdown. Since you unloaded the fab clip on this guy, you have to give the man some grace with a huge week 4 matchup that he had. But ultimately, Nick Chubb felt kind of more in the driver's seat last time out and scoring a touchdown. I have no interest in playing the guessing game here. Woody and 9-inch Nicholas Chubb belong on your bench. Thank you guys all so much for watching. If you ended up enjoying today's video, make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some gold doubloons. Leave a like on today's video to help me out a ton. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen it already. I love you so much. I hope you have a great one. We are almost at 45,000 subscribers. Love you guys more than ever. I really appreciate you. Have a great one. Hope you guys have a great rest of your guys' day. We'll be back later with the quarterback start sets. Love you. Good boy.